Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing well. I am going to just put you right here. All right. So, I'm going to get right into it. I've tried to film this a couple of times. It ends up being super long. So, I'm just going to bulldoze through it. Today I wanted to talk about recovery. Recovery is a really uncomfortable topic for me. I can talk one-on-one with people about it when we're sharing our experiences and stuff. But talking on a platform like this is really uncomfortable because you're showing kind of your vulnerability. So this is really hard for me to do. But I feel like it's necessary. I think it's really necessary to share what recovery is like and what it feels like when you're sliding back and how to kind of deal with that. When I talk about recovery, I talk about a really broad sense of recovery. We're all recovering from things through our life, right? We're always recovering from trauma, from relationship problems, like relationships ending, abusive bosses, like PTSD, like situations that happened that were just dealt with terribly, or eating disorders, or alcoholism, or addictions, right? So we're always kind of recovering, and everyone is in some sort of recovery. And that's kind of how I see it. I see that we're always learning and progressing and healing. But when I talk about recovery, so I'll talk about my own personal recovery because that's what I can pull from. So my personal recovery, I'm recovering, so it hasn't even been 2 years. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think here, guys. So it was 1 year in this summer. So it will be, so 1.5 years. So 1.5 years of recovery. Now, when I say that doesn't mean that it was I'm when people say recovery, people don't always understand that it's horrible. Recovery is not like you're recovered. It's different. You're going through it. So you're going through the ups and downs. There was days where I was I don't feel like I'm recovering at all. And it was inching along, tiny little steps. And it was relearning how to eat again, relearning how to move my body after the damage that had happened. Because of my eating disorder, because of my chronic pain, had been triggered and all of these things. So it was painfully slow. And I tell people when I first got on my mat, it was I would spend 10 minutes laying in Shavasana crying because just moving my legs hurt. Every muscle in my body was so depleted. Every cell in my body was so depleted. So I was losing hair. I would bruise really easily. My muscles ached, to the core. When you, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like your muscles are just completely contracted. There's just not enough nutrients in your body. So you're just in pain all the time, which just perpetuates that trauma to not cope, right? It's if you feel like crap, the last thing you want to do is get up and exercise, right? Or move your body, which is what you need to do, but that's not how you feel, right? So recovery is really painfully slow. That's what I'm trying to get at, is recovery is not, so even though it's been 1.5 years, it's been the slow process, even though what is kind of been portrayed is that, I've made leaps and bounds, and I have. I acknowledge that I have made leaps and bounds, but in the process, it was painfully hard. So people who are dealing with recovery, when we have a trauma, we lean on things to cope, right? Some people drink, some people do drugs, some people have eating disorders, some people find healthy ways to cope. There's lots of people that have really good ways of coping with stress, but the people that are recovering are the people that have reached for something to cope, and it maybe wasn't the best option, even though it was kind of all you had, right? And so we reach for these things as a coping mechanism when we realize the coping mechanism isn't really helping us. It's damaging us. It's damaging our body. It's damaging our relationships. It's damaging our life. Then that's when we step into like, okay, we have a quote unquote problem. We have something that needs to be fixed. And that part of that process of fixing whatever that is fixing what's underneath it. So generally speaking, there's something that has triggered it. Some trauma, something that happened that triggered this poof thing, right? And now we're coping, or now we're not coping. Really, we're not coping, so we're reaching for something to numb us, to help us, to, take it away, whatever it is, right? So that's part of the process, is that we realize we have a problem, we find what the problem is underneath, we start working on it, and then that makes it easier. It makes it easier to recover. It makes it easier for us to move into recovery. So the process of recovering is really tricky, and for everyone it's so different. So for me, it was setting up safe places all around me. For me, it was finding people in my life that were really supportive and holding on to them and letting go of toxic situations, relationships. It was, for me, about creating as much of a safe space as possible. So I almost put like this energetic bubble around myself, and anything that was in it was okay. But everything outward, it was like, no. And I would shut myself off to everything and everyone that even remotely triggered anything. Because as soon as I'd be triggered, I wasn't healthy enough to hold myself up and to be like, okay, I'm being triggered right now. Why am I being triggered? Okay, this has to do with this, and be able to cope with it, right? I wasn't at that place yet. I was in like the beginning stages of recovery. So I literally put this bubble around myself, and it was like anything or anyone that even remotely makes me feel like anything is not good, I can't have in my life. Doesn't mean I don't love them, doesn't mean they won't be in my life later, but I have to cut out everything and everyone that is triggering, because I needed to get better, right? So recovery is about setting up those places, setting up those boundaries, and protecting yourself as you go through these really raw, painful stages of recovery. And recovery is, excuse me, guys, I have like a tickle in my throat. So recovery isn't, just a steady straight line. It is 10 steps forward, 5 steps back, 3 steps forward, 20 steps back. And that's the way it goes. It's not just, we don't make progress straight through. And this can be very exhausting. It is very exhausting going through recovery, especially the first little bit. But yeah, so recovery is a painful process. So if you're in recovery, to remember, like, it is not like you get there. It's like a process, and to be kind and patient with yourself, and be okay with things taking time, and setting up, like I said, those places, right? So what happens when we have something in our life that triggers us, and triggers us a little bit more than just like, okay, I'm triggered. Okay, I'm, wanting to reach for this, but I'm not going to, I'm talking about like really, really big shifts in your life. Big stresses, lose your job or your marriage, or, like for us, it was this big move, right? So when I was in recovery, I created these places all around me. So now that I've moved where I am, I've lost all of that. I've lost everything that anchored me, everything that I used as a way of dealing with my triggers, right? Like if I was feeling triggered, I was like, okay, I can go for a bike ride around the loop that I would normally do, or I can go to the coffee shop, that's my favorite coffee shop, or I can, call up my mom and go for a walk, So there's all these things that I created, and since moving, I've lost all that. So it's unfamiliar. And for somebody in recovery, it is really uncomfortable to be in a place that you don't feel anchored in. So for me, it's been really trying to put those anchors in, to place things in my life that feel familiar. So even though this actual physical place is not familiar, I posted yesterday about picking seashells and how that was familiar to me. So going through those steps of doing something that your body remembers. So for you, if you were an alcoholic and you were triggered, and instead of going to a bar, you had your favorite coffee place to go to, and that's what you would do if you were super stressed or you were triggered. One of the first things you would do is set up your coffee shop. Find your coffee shop that you go to that feels comfortable and safe, so that when that trigger comes, because it's going to come, life isn't peachy keen, and it is going to come, that you have that place to go to. So it's setting yourself up to create a space so that you have balance and that you have a place to fall on when everything happens or when things happen. And when things happen and you realize that you don't have those places or spaces, you're going to slide back a bit, right? That doesn't always mean that you're going to slide all the way back to the beginning. As you get stronger, you get better at catching yourself. For me, with having an eating disorder for, like most of my life, for me, it's been the first thing I had to do when I got here was start making meals, because we were eating out, we weren't eating, I was stressed out, it wasn't eating, it was all over the map. So one of the first things we did when we were here was start making good meals and healthy meals, and kind of grounding myself into more of a routine with eating and scheduling and all that kind of stuff. And that was what I needed to do. So that was the first and foremost thing. And then all these other things have been over time. So finding my favorite trails and finding my places to go for my coffee or whatever when I'm having a rough day. Because let's face it, life isn't going to be perfect. And even when you recover, it's still something you've leaned on for so long as a coping mechanism. So when something is going to happen in your life, that's where your brain and body is first going to go, right? And then you're the one that's got to talk yourself into a place of being okay, I'm not going to go there. I know that that's my normal reaction to go there, but I'm not going to go there. So my big rant and spiel on this is basically just sharing my journey and reaching out and saying, if you are in recovery and you are in the beginning stages of recovery, the really painful, hard stuff, set your places up, set your safe places up, go and find everything that makes you feel good, and make sure that you put a bubble around you and you put those boundaries up and you allow everything else that is not serving you in a way that is healthy and healing to fall back so that you can focus on your recovery, your healing journey. So that's first and foremost, finding your places, finding your people, your tribe, your checking tribe. I had a yoga friend from training, so one of my tribe members, who was my check-in buddy. When my husband went up north to work, it was a huge trigger for me because that's when I got really sick. He was gone. So my brain went back to oh my goodness, this is going to happen again, and you're going to hit rock bottom again, and this is going to be terrible, and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't feeling good about it. So she was really, I reached out to her, and I was quite emotional about him leaving and how much of a trigger that was. And she was so good about just being hey, you know what, I'm just going to check in with you and see how you're doing, right? Just kind of like a sponsor for an alcoholic, just checking in, having those people that check in and call you and say, how are you feeling today? How are you coping? Do you need to go for a walk? Do you need something? Do you need some support? And people can do what they can do. Obviously, you're still the one going through it, and it still recovery feels like the loneliest journey ever. It is the loneliest journey because a lot of times the ones who are in recovery don't want to share. They don't want to share. We feel like a burden, or we feel people are going to look at you well, what's wrong with you? Just eat or don't eat, or you know what I mean? It's just, it feels like such a raw thing to share with people. It's a lot of shame that comes along with being in recovery. But I like to challenge you to find your few people that you can talk to. And if you can go to a support group, that's fabulous, because then you have other people that just get it. And they'll be on different parts of their recovery journey. And it is so refreshing to talk to people that it's like, they don't look at you like you're crazy. They're like, oh yeah, I've been there. I know what that feels like. So yeah, finding your people, finding your places, finding the things that nourish you, and putting up your boundaries. Those are the most important thing in recovery. And when you have these big shifts in your life, like I'm experiencing right now, is holding on to those things, those things in your life that are familiar, even if everything around isn't. Going and doing the things that always made you feel good, because your body will remember them. You will get on that walking trail and your body will be like, oh yeah, I remember going for walks and how good it felt. And even though it's a different trail in a different place and a different whatever, it's your body's going to remember that, and it's going to release all that good stuff, right? So yeah, so that is my spiel on recovery. My personal recovery is it's good, it's okay, it's going, it is where it is. Like, I don't know, it's not even like a right or wrong, or like, you should be here, you shouldn't be here. You kind of are where you are, right? But I'm here talking about it, so that's a huge step. If you have, anything at all, just reach out, and know that there are others out there that are like you and that are struggling, or that are in the process of getting things together, and you're not alone. All right, so be kind, be patient, loving to yourself in this journey, and recognize that even though you slide back a bit, that doesn't mean that you're going all the way to the bottom. Each time you learn something, each time you slide back, it's an opportunity to learn something, so that the next time you don't slide back. And then maybe something else will trigger and you'll slide back a little bit again, but then you learn something, and then the next time. So it's just like you're picking up tools as you go, right? And you're learning, you're relearning how to cope with life and with stress in situations, and as healthy as a way as possible, right? So that you can be happy and healthy for yourself, for the people around you, for the collective energy. And it's so important, and you're so worth it, right? You're so worth it. One of the biggest things I think people struggle with is not feeling worthy to recover, and getting attached to the idea of like, what is recovery? Like, my biggest thing was like, what does it mean to recover? I don't know anything else. I've been living my life like this. I didn't even know I had an eating disorder for most of my life, and looking back on journal entries from when I was 13, and going, oh my gosh, like, how was this missed all this time, and it's been my whole life. So how do you relearn something that's so normal? It's so normal to you. So it takes time. It takes a lot of time, but knowing that we can create whatever we want after. So if recovery to you, ask yourself, what does that look like? And if you don't know, imagine what that might look like. And keep imagining and keep thinking and keep visualizing that. And that's what you're reaching for. That's what you're manifesting, is that I want to be a peaceful, happy person. I want to be able to eat food and feel good. That was one of my biggest things, was I want to be like that. I want to enjoy my food. Reaching for those things, whatever they are for you, and manifesting that, but creating that image first. It's a blank sheet. Recovery can be whatever you need it to be. So what do you want your life to be? And working towards that. All right. I've talked really long on this topic. I am sorry. This is a really long video, but I just feel like, you know what? I'm not the only one out there. And if I can share and just even help one person to feel not alone, or to get one tool that might help them in their recovery by sharing my rawness, then it's all worth it, right? It's all worth it to me. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'm going to go for my walk today. So yeah, I will talk to you guys really soon. All right. Lots of love.